people couldn't see or hear my disability, and there would be this disbelief, sometimes accusations.
I have people say to me, "Oh, you don't look sick. You look great. You don't look sick at all."
I've definitely been at a point where I've hidden my invisible disability.
I realize now that what I was doing was I was camouflaging.
Today, we're talking about invisible disabilities.
Deep conversations, real honest stories, and complex, relevant issues all examined through a disability lens. This is In Focus.
Hello, I'm April Hubbard. My guests this week are Chris Vallée and Samantha Kemp-Jackson. Chris is a former AMI TV reporter. Currently, he's the co-chair of the Kids Come First working group and works in multimedia at the Children's Hospital of Eastern Ontario. He lives in Ottawa. Samantha is a writer, content creator, media commentator, and podcaster. She lives in Toronto. Joining me now through Zoom are Chris and Samantha. Welcome to you both.
Thanks so much for having me, April. I'm really happy to be here.
Thank you so much for having me as well.
Chris, can you tell us a little bit about the disabilities that you have?
I live with an invisible disability since the age of about 4. I was diagnosed with epilepsy, so I live with tonic-clonic epilepsy, which is what people associate to as full-body seizures, but I also have partial complex, which is basically mind seizures and brain seizures.
What about you, Samantha?
I have lupus, which is an autoimmune illness. So I was in my mid-50s and thinking that I was menopausal because I was in so much pain I couldn't get out of bed. And it got to the point where it was so debilitating that I went to the doctor and they couldn't figure it out at first. But when my blood work came out, they realized that there was something off, and that's when the diagnosis came along.
You're also a mother of 4. How has disability shaped your experience of motherhood?
Oh, wow. That's a big question. And I would say the short answer is that it has affected my ability to parent considerably. I guess the good side of that is that my children understand my abilities and limitations, as does my husband, but it doesn't make it that much easier. Some mornings I have to stay in bed and, take some steroids or, just kind of slowly ease out of bed. And that's been a real change. And, having to tell yourself or kind of reconfigure in your mind who you are as a person is a large part of the acceptance of this type of an illness. So having to tell myself, I'm not lazy. I'm just in pain and I can't move, or, I just can't get things done right now because I just feel terrible. And it affects the whole family. It affects how much I can cook, and we order out a lot more. It affects, can I, clean up right now? No, I'm too tired or things hurt. So yeah, it does affect every avenue of my life and my family's life.
Thank you for sharing your journey towards acceptance, Samantha. Chris, as someone with invisible disability, do you ever feel like your body is betraying you? And if so, how do you deal with these feelings?
I definitely have felt like there were times where my condition has prevented me from doing things that I really wanted to do in life. I really stopped working out completely because that was something that really triggered seizures for me. And I could thankfully say now that I know my body very well. So I do work out again, which is something that's extremely important for me. But I just take breaks and I know what I need in order not to cross that line and be in that danger zone. So in some ways, in the early years, as a teenager especially, I definitely felt like I was missing out on a lot. But I'm thankfully in the place now where I'm able to do some of those things again, but just an adapted version of them.
I hear you both describing this learning process where you've adapted to a new way of being. It's a difficult evolution, but one I've experienced myself as well. Turning now from our perceptions of ourselves to how other people perceive us, Samantha, have you ever felt the need to justify or prove your disability in any way?
Yeah, I have. Sometimes it's little things. I have a permit in front of my car, and there's times where I've pulled into accessible parking spots, like at the supermarket, and I see people looking at me sideways because I look able-bodied, I guess, but they don't understand that I can't walk very far a lot of the time. Some days are better than other. I have people say to me, "Oh, you don't look sick. You look great. You don't look sick at all." And I think, well, I guess today I feel okay, but I do have an illness that is, debilitating at times.
Absolutely. Okay, let's talk about disclosure. Chris, how do you decide when to disclose your disability and who needs to know about it?
If I'm completely honest with you, that to this day is still a challenge for me. So my family and friends know, everyone who's around me knows, anyone who I'm with for a longer period of time needs to know that I have this condition, because it is really important that I stay safe. You never know when a seizure will happen. There are times where I even apply for a job and there's a question. The first question is, are you part of the LGBTQ plus community? Thankfully, I've developed enough confidence to say, yes, I am. But I'm still not at the point where I am confident enough to say I'm also part of the disability community, because I don't know who's on the other side seeing that information. And to me, that's still difficult, because I don't want to be put in a box and categorized and stigmatized. So there's still a lot of work to be done on my personal self. But I'd like to say that there's been a lot of progress over the years, especially through my work with AMI.
As a disabled, mad, queer woman myself, it's really exciting to see other disability advocates speaking up about the cross sections of their identity. So thanks for sharing.
Awesome. Pride.
Chris, living with chronic illness can be unpredictable and makes planning hard to do. How does this affect your day-to-day life?
That's a really good question. Planning is indeed very difficult. You can wake up one day and feel really poorly. Sleep is actually my biggest trigger for a seizure to happen. It sounds silly, but even if I have 7 hours of sleep versus 8, it puts me at greater risk. So really, I think at the end of the day, it all comes down to honesty and knowing yourself better than anyone else knows you. So people cannot assume what you need at that very moment unless you step forward and say, hey, I can't do this today because this is what happened. And really just being honest with my boss at work, my family, my friends.
It's so important to have people around us who understand and can support us. Samantha, earlier I heard you use the phrase, but you don't look sick. Why is it so dangerous to assume that people with disability or chronic illness look or behave a certain way?
Oh, there's so much to unpack here. I guess, April, at the basis of it is that you should never really make assumptions about anybody, because you really don't know. And if the assumptions are made, then you are potentially putting someone in a really difficult or untenable situation. So, for example, if you look at somebody like myself or like Chris and you say, they look like they're totally fine, I don't know what they're talking about. And they tell someone like myself, you have to walk for 2 kilometers to get to this place. Or they tell Chris, oh, don't worry, Chris, you'll get 3 or 4 hours of sleep because this project's going to take a long time, but you'll be fine. That is going to physiologically damage us in ways that they would not understand. So having those assumptions and presumptions about people is never a good idea.
Agreed. That said, some of us in the invisible disability community rely on the practice of masking. Are there advantages or disadvantages to masking your symptoms?
I've definitely been at a point where I've hidden my invisible disability. I think the time where I actually came to terms with my disability and started that path of self-acceptance was, for many, many years, I was afraid that someone would see me have a seizure. My biggest fear growing up, especially as an early teenager, was for me to have a seizure in front of my friends and be ridiculed. And the time where I started accepting my disability was actually when that moment happened. I had a seizure in public and my friends were around, my teacher was around, everyone who I cared deeply was around, and I was afraid what they would think. But after that seizure happened the next day or the next few days, because I stayed home for a few days afterwards recovering, but they were all worried about me and they weren't making fun of me. They were actually very concerned. And that was a time where I realized that there are really good people out there, and sometimes those fears are internalized.
Yeah, what you just said about having those internalized fears is so relatable. Thanks for adding that. Samantha, what is something you wish people could understand about your experience with invisible illness?
I think it's really, don't make assumptions about people. When you meet someone or you see somebody, don't assume anything about them, and be willing to change your perception about who you think you are in the presence of, because I can guarantee that you probably will be surprised by what the person in front of you is going through or dealing with that you would never have anticipated.
Samantha and Chris, thank you so much for kicking off this important topic with me.
Thank you so much. It was an honor to be part of this conversation.
Thanks so much, April, for giving us the opportunity to speak about invisible illness.
Coming up, a life-changing diagnosis.
I knew I was different. I never knew it was because of a different brain makeup.
In Focus will return. You're watching In Focus.
Up next, how one woman's late-in-life diagnosis of an invisible disability changed her life and led to a new career calling. Growing up, Wanda Deschamps of Waterloo, Ontario, recognized she had a distinct perspective.
So I definitely knew that I was different from my classmates for a number of reasons. I noticed their interests were different than mine. I noticed their reactions to things were often different than mine. It was pointed out to me that I was different in some ways that weren't very kind. So I knew I was different. However, my family was different. So I was the youngest of 10 children. My parents were older. They were well-educated and well-traveled. I thought it was because my environment was just so different. I never knew it was because of a different brain makeup. Almost as long as I can remember, I was always shifting and modifying my behavior to fit in.
Wanda continued camouflaging her authentic self throughout her life, which included graduate school, a long career in the philanthropic sector, children, and a second marriage to her husband, Ryan Deschamps.
I saw Wanda as somebody who was, highly competent. She had a lot of respect in the community. She had a high performing job. She was a high performing person.
Something that really worked to my disadvantage was that even though I had low self-esteem, I always presented, from what I heard from feedback, is that I always presented as having outward confidence.
It was Wanda who considered she might be on the autism spectrum after both her sons were diagnosed.
I said to my family physician, I'd like my own psychological assessment. I think I have it too.
At the age of 46, Wanda's diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder was confirmed.
I would say mostly it was a surprise, but then slowly some of the things as I learned, I thought I knew a lot about autism, but I understood autism in boys.
Unfortunately, neurodiversity is still very much viewed as a man's condition, and it's been researched from that perspective, and it's been diagnosed from that perspective. So this is one of the reasons that underdiagnosis persists in women and girls. They're either not diagnosed or they're misdiagnosed.
Soon after diagnosis, she made a career change.
I said I'm going to help increase the participation level of the neurodiverse population in the workforce.
She founded a consulting company called Liberty Co.
There's still this perception that autism and neurodiversity belongs in the lower levels of the organization and more precarious contract positions. And while, of course, that's really important and there's a lot of positions there, I always say that neurodiverse talent belongs at all levels, from the boardroom to the C-suite to the office cubicle.
Jason Field, President and CEO of Life Sciences Ontario, has worked with Wanda.
Wanda's had a huge impact on our organization. She really opened our eyes to, the world of neurodiversity and how often that is an overlooked element of accessibility. And so she has been a great mentor and teacher to our organization. She is absolutely phenomenal, a real thought leader in the area of neurodiversity.
Wanda does this work for her sons and for all the neurodivergent individuals, particularly women.
I want us to destigmatize. I want us to move from a place of autism and any facet of neurodiversity, whether it be dyslexia or dyspraxia or ADHD. I want us to move from a weakness, thought and thinking process to a strengths-based approach. That differences are good, and that includes different brain makeups.
Her diagnosis has affected more than her work life.
I'm happier, I'm more relaxed, I'm more positive. I don't let things get to me. I have so much more energy. That was a really big thing. I was working so hard to fit in and shift and modify that I often didn't have energy. I didn't have the energy I wanted to be with the kids. I don't want anyone to think that the diagnosis is the end. It's really only the beginning. I'm going to be on this journey for the rest of my life. I received so many answers to questions that seemed unanswerable. A big piece was I felt like I finally gave myself permission to be myself, and I call it living life as real Wanda.
Coming up, Hidden Disability Symbol Canada.
One of my goals is to have a hidden disability symbol at every parking spot placed beside every wheelchair symbol.
In Focus will return. This is In Focus.
The wheelchair symbol, also known as the International Symbol of Access, is one of the most recognizable symbols in the world. According to our next guest, it's a good symbol, but not perfect. Laura Brydges has a brain injury caused by a car accident in 2005. She is the co-founder of Hidden Disability Symbol Canada. For the last decade, she has been advocating for Canada to adopt an additional, more inclusive symbol. She joins me now from her home in Ottawa. Laura, welcome to In Focus.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Laura, you describe yourself as having a hidden disability. Why is this a term that you connect with?
I realized that very soon after the accident, people couldn't see or hear my disability, and there would be this disbelief, sometimes accusations. There would just be this element that people want to believe what they see and want to believe what they hear, and they can't do that when they meet me. So I wanted to go with a broader term, and so I choose to describe it as hidden.
And why is it important that we have a symbol that represents hidden disabilities?
The symbol is intended to be used as a self-advocacy tool for individual members of the hidden disability community, but it's also intended to be an agent for change, to build social awareness of our needs and our common experiences. And once we achieve that awareness, I am convinced that it will achieve systemic change as well.
How does the current wheelchair symbol fall short?
One of the most common comments I have gotten on my Facebook page, and I notice it in the news quite frequently, is that somebody who parks with a permit at an accessible parking spot, if they walk out of their car, they get accosted because people do not perceive them to be disabled. As far as I'm concerned, this symbol has had its day, it's done its job, and at the same time, it has created exclusion of the hidden disability community. When you think about it, it's a person in a wheelchair, and that's all it is. So we need to broaden this. One of my goals is to have a hidden disability symbol adopted nationally, and that at every parking spot, there's a hidden disability symbol placed beside every wheelchair symbol at accessible parking spots. And you can just imagine how that will improve people's awareness of the needs of the hidden disability community.
Can you tell us more about the hidden disability symbol you designed?
It is a circle with a symbol of a human, and this human figure is divided in half. So half is white, meaning what we don't see, what we don't hear, and half is blue. And the division runs vertically, so it runs from head to toe, because hidden disabilities affect every part of people's bodies.
I love that description. What kind of community support have you received for the symbol?
There's a lot of support. I got immediate support from the Brain Injury Society of Toronto and Brain Injury Canada. We've developed a website, and on the website, we have a long list of allies. So yeah, I think there's a lot of support there.
I'm glad to hear that. Support for inclusion and recognizing those with hidden disabilities is so important.
Especially now that we recognize hidden disabilities because of the public health concerns with long COVID, with Lyme disease and dementia. These are all on the increase, and they are hidden disabilities, or they can be. So I think even from a public health perspective, it's very important that we move forward and that we talk about hidden disabilities and we deal with it. And I think a hidden disability symbol is probably the best tool to move that agenda forward.
It looks like our time together has come to an end. Thanks for joining me, Laura.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
As we heard from our guest today, being invisibly disabled often means facing judgment, scrutiny, stigma, and fear. But by speaking up and telling our stories, we expand society's understanding of disability and how it appears. This awareness, combined with our own self-acceptance and a few useful tools, will lead to a kinder and more inclusive world for all disabled people. Thanks for joining us.
Host April Hubbard, producer Wendy Purvis, videographers Andrew Pickup, Matthew McGurk, editors Maryam Bakhtiar, Andrew Pickup, segment producer Jillian Gillis, reporter Alex Smyth, freelance camera Jeremy Kennedy, narrator Grant Hardy, media accessibility specialist M. Williams, audio post Mark Phoenix, graphics Mike Smith. Opening theme package composed by Matthew Monius for Matt Mac Music. Senior producer Michelle Dudas. President and CEO David Arrington. Copyright 2022 Accessible Media Incorporated.